Before I bring on my guest, I want to give a quick review of the Mueller Report, which came out in redacted form last week. Not surprisingly, there was a lot of buzz about it on Friday. Here's my take. It is incredibly boring. What an awful read. The prose is flat and sterile, the characters are uninspiring, and the plot, insofar as it exists, is hardly a page-turner. I had assumed, with a name like The Mueller Report, it was going to be some kind of cool John Grisham-style novel, like The Pelican Brief. When you read the table of contents, you're like, oh, neat, Russians. Maybe this is going to be more Crimson Tide. Okay, awesome. But no, it's just a long, boring political Rorschach test. And spoiler alert, the president doesn't even go to prison, which would have at least made for a fun surprise ending. Here are things which aren't in the Mueller Report. Ninjas, sex, a spunky sidekick, zombies, starships, old British sailing vessels, submarines, or a dog who can play basketball. Any of which would have made it a better read, but no. It's just a bloviating orange guy falling all over himself to try and keep Mueller from getting him. From a literary standpoint, it's dreck. So, because I have a flourish for writing, I've tried to spice up this abysmal document. Take this section from page 290. This is where Trump finds out that Mueller is the one conducting the investigation. It reads, the president learned of the special counsel's appointment from Sessions, who was with the president, Hunt, and McGahn, conducting interviews for a new FBI director. Sessions stepped out of the Oval Office to take a call from Rosenstein, who told him about the special counsel appointment, and Sessions then returned to inform the president of the news. According to the notes written by Hunt, when Sessions told the president that a special counsel had been appointed, the president slumped back in his chair and said, "Oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm." The president became angry and lambasted the attorney general for his decision to recuse from the investigation, saying, "How could you let this happen, Jeff?" Ugh. All right. So that's the original one. Now I'm going to read you my version. Sessions told the president that a special counsel had been appointed. The president slumped back in his chair and said, "Oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm Mike Pence emerged from the shadows, grim-faced and resolved. "It's the end of the line, Biff," he said, pulling a revolver out of his shoulder holster. He handed it grip first to the president, who stared down at the loaded pistol in disbelief. "Do it," said Pence, guiding the muzzle of the gun towards him. "Do it." See, that way's way more interesting. Here's another section of the original version. In February 2014, Ivanka Trump met with Emin Algalarov and toured the Crocus City site during a visit to Moscow. From March 2014 through July 2014, the group discussed design standards and other architectural elements. For example, in July 2014, members of the Trump organization sent Crocus group counterparties questions about the demographics of these prospective buyers in the Crocus City area, the developments of neighboring parcels, and Crocus City and concepts for redesigning portions of the building. Okay, we get it. Thanks. All right. Here's my version, much better. Ivanka Trump had a weak spot for two things: architecture and Russians with thick necks. And that made Emin Algalarov the perfect storm. She strutted into his office in a tight, thigh-length trench coat, and he stood up to shake her hand and held it just a bit longer than he should have. "It's a pleasure to see you again, Ivanka," he said. Ivanka pursed her lips. "Good to be seen, Emin." She took a seat and then slowly uncrossed and crossed her legs. "You gonna pour a lady a drink?" Emin smiled and set a bottle of vodka over the architectural guidelines for the Crocus site's counterparty regulatory queries. If he didn't have that bottle of vodka to distract him, he mused, it would be all he could do to stop himself from knocking everything off the desk and grabbing this young American woman with his strong Slavic arms. That's when Mike Pence emerged from the shadows, grim-faced and resolved. "It's the end of the line, Biff," he said, pulling a revolver out of his shoulder holster. He slapped it down on the desk hard and slid it to Emin. "Do it," he said. "Do it." See, my version is far more entertaining. Okay, now here's the bit where Jeff Sessions, about Jeff Sessions from the original report. Also on May 18th, Sessions finalized a resignation letter that stated, "Pursuant to our conversation of yesterday and at your request, I hereby offer my resignation." Sessions, accompanied by Hunt, brought the letter to the White House and handed it to the president. The president put the resignation letter in his pocket and asked Sessions several times whether he wanted to continue serving as Attorney General. Sessions ultimately told the president he wanted to stay, but it was up to the president. The president said he wanted Sessions to stay. At the conclusion of the meeting, the president shook Sessions' hand but did not return the resignation letter. Okay, here again. I can save this boring doorstop of a book by adding some juice. Here's what I would add. Sessions stepped out of the Oval Office and after shutting the door, stared at a portrait of George Washington. "I heard you tried to resign, imp," said Mike Pence, emerging from the shadows, grim-faced and resolved. "Did he take your resignation letter?" "Spider," said Jeff Sessions. "You're ubiquitous. I assume you already knew he took my letter, but has not yet accepted my resignation." "Of course," said Pence. "I have little birdies everywhere. Did you give him the other letter, imp?" "No," said Sessions. "But I've hidden it, and if something bad should happen to me, my friends will release it. And then you're through, Spider." Pence nodded. No one could know the contents of Jeff Sessions' other letter. That the true king of Westeros was Michael Dukakis, because his real parents were Dwight Eisenhower and Rhaegar Targaryen. Mike Pence opened a window and tossed a revolver at some Canadian tourists. "End of the line, Biff!" he shouted. "Do it! Do it!" So far, I am knocking this out of the park every time I sit down at my typewriter, whereas Mueller is dribbling out tedious, convoluted novel where the president and his campaign don't technically collude with the Russians but are still perfectly happy for them to interfere in the election, and then the president tries to obstruct justice anyway but doesn't manage to pull it off. Boring. If I had written it, here's what I would have done. I would have made Trump innocent of colluding with the Russians, but then I would have had him willfully obstruct Mueller's investigation anyway, and that obstruction of justice would then lead to his impeachment, which would be hilarious. Also, I would have added a dog who plays basketball.